final hour comes, and there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack. But would the slackers and the mujahideen be equal? So now you know where the term comes from, and what we're talking about, the civilization jihad, is a war. Let's get that straight. It is a war against all of North America from what they've declared. And what does that mean? We're going to talk about the influence operations on colleges today. Ryan Mauro, let me just introduce him first before I bring him on. Ryan Mauro is the director of the Clarion Intelligence Network, a group that tracks extremist activity throughout the world and regularly provides information to law enforcement and policymakers. Though primarily focused on Islamist extremism, which is what President Trump wants these days, Mauro's work at CIN, the Clarion Intelligence Network, includes providing intelligence on left-wing and right-wing extremists such as anarchists, white supremacists, communists, cults, and hostile foreign influence operations. Mauro's group is a division of the Clarion Project, a nonprofit education organization where he serves as the national security analyst. And Clarion Project has done a number of wonderful movies. Ryan and I have known each other for a while, and I will say this. Ryan is the first person to encourage me to write a book. So for everybody who's been listening to me for the time that you've been listening to me, you need to say thank you to Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Paul. Thanks so much for that.
Well, you got me started on this, Ben. You encouraged.
You started yourself. I remember you emailing me about IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, and you were doing research on your own about the money flows to the universities and what that all meant. So don't give myself too much credit here. You started yourself.
You encouraged me. That was all I needed. And I had
and now maybe you're regretting it.
You know what kills me about this whole thing is it just seems bigger than I ever expected. And I think in my mind, everything is simpler now, which is, I think the longer you're in this, that things seem, they're not as complex, I don't think. Sometimes,
really?
Maybe that's
for
just
me,
the way
it's actually
I'm
the opposite. It gets more and more complex and more of a headache as things go on, because I'll notice more tricks, more strategies, and also more nuances. Like, it's easy to, among the radicals, put them all in one box, and they do deserve to all be in one box. But then you'll notice that there's different divisions within them, and then there'll be divisions among them. And so there's really an infinite amount of possibilities for you to go through if you're looking for nuance and details and changes in strategies and leads to investigate. It really never ends.
I'm just amazed what I'm learning from some of this stuff. So let's go into the article. Your article on foreign influence ops on U.S. universities is very important. It's sad. I think too many of the intelligence businesses fail to grasp the message you're trying to deliver. And no matter who I've talked to in intelligence, they are missing the huge gambit of connection to the education system in the United States. They don't get it. They don't. Everyone I've talked to, I mean, maybe you've talked to someone else who gets it, but I haven't. It just blows my mind. You begin with a huge statement that should have called everyone to wake up and listen when you stated the Department of Education is currently investigating funding from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, and presumably other countries. You provided a link to a KTLA.com article this past June about Georgetown University and Texas A&M University receiving foreign funding. Is that what got you interested in the topic?
Well, I've been interested in the topic for a long time, but I haven't always had the assets and other analysts around at Clarion Project to help me tackle this massive project of going through the Department of Education records and compiling all the numbers, which is just, I mean, it took us, my entire team, like a month and a half to do, and that's like all we did. And the numbers were just astonishing. Over $10 billion from foreign sources going to American colleges and universities since 2012, and that's $10 billion that we know about. if you look at mainstream media reports, like even from the New York Times and others, we know that that's only a portion because the schools don't disclose everything, and these records only cover what these schools disclose and is a direct transfer. It doesn't include what a foreign government or a foreign organization like the Muslim Brotherhood or whoever, the Iranian regime, may funnel through a nonprofit acting as a front. So it's $10 billion going to American colleges and universities since 2012. That was declared by universities and does not include the amounts transferred to our schools through other methods from foreign governments and organizations.
So I just want to repeat that one thing you just said. You said these numbers are from 2012?
2012 till now.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that. That it's just I'm looking at the numbers and I'm still kind of. I was going through them again before we started. I'm just kind of mind numbed with all of it. Complex. Yeah. They're finding sneaky ways to do things. I guess you could say that to me. I think it's a lot of the same stuff. Unfortunately, it's just the same people trying to do the same things. Is how I'm starting to see it. The KTLA article, it states federal law requires U.S. colleges to report contracts and donations from foreign sources totaling $250,000 or more. I'm curious if you found information that led you to believe the universities were not reporting foreign financing accurately. KTLA alluded that such evidence existed. Did you find something?
Sure. I've been talking to some other researchers who have been going through numbers that may be nefarious and in some cases may be mistakes. Coming from places like Bermuda. Like I don't think Bermuda is running a foreign influence operation against the United States, but that amount in that example of what someone sent to me wasn't disclosed. So in some cases it's accounting errors, and in some cases where it's larger amounts, there may be nefarious intent. So what mainstream media sources have reported, multiple of them, especially in regards to China, is that it's possible that more than half of the donations aren't even being disclosed by the universities. On top of that, we know, again, from mainstream media sources reporting about the Education Department's own internal investigation, that there are apparently accounting discrepancies in regards to especially Qatar, but some of these other countries. We don't know the full extent of it because that's obviously all an internal investigation, but there is a consensus about this, that this is happening.
Wow. Your article mentions the Qatar Foundation donated a jaw-dropping $33 million to Georgetown University in 2018. What can you tell us about the Qatar Foundation?
So the Qatar Foundation is a very well-known powerhouse of a nonprofit entity in Qatar that's basically run by the government of Qatar. So it appears independent, but then you look at who actually leads it, and it's like Qatari government officials. So they don't really hide it. And that $33 million to Georgetown University in 2018, that's just 1 year and one single transaction. We know from just what's been declared that Qatar has spent almost $1.5 billion since 2012 investing it in universities and colleges, and in some cases clearly for nefarious reasons. Like it's not student scholarships. The best example of that would be Northeastern University, where they actually had a contract to get this money with Qatar so that they could set up a joint program with Al Jazeera, the top jihadist terrorist propaganda station around the world. And the goal from the perspective of Al Jazeera and stated in public statements was to broaden the appeal of Al Jazeera and help it enter the American marketplace. So you had Northeastern University publicly taking money from Qatar for the express purpose of assisting Al Jazeera. That's as close to treason as you get without being able to make that legal accusation of it actually being treason. I think morally it qualifies as treason, maybe not legally. the Qatar Foundation is one of the main outfits that the Qatari government uses to send money to these universities, and the Qatar Foundation is known, and you can see this in a simple Google search, for doing things with extremists, including those that are terrorist financiers like Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Qatar Foundation had a specific center in his name with the stated purpose of spreading his horrible teachings around the world. So when universities are getting money from a foundation that embraces extremists, and part of its stated mission is promoting the Muslim Brotherhood doctrine around the world, specifically the doctrine authored by a guy who has said that he hopes Allah brings about the next Holocaust upon Jews at the hands of the Muslims and finances Hamas, I tend to view that very suspiciously.
I mean, I always wonder when we get to those borders of treason and not treason, what will it take to convince people how wrong they are? I mean, or do they already? I mean, to me, it sounds like they're doing it with the intent of killing, of going against the country. But it's really once you start seeing that stuff, it just I don't know. Does it make you upset or? Because I know it gets me sometimes.
It does. The impression I get, and this is partially because in the past when I've seen people team up with radical organizations, it seems like they genuinely don't know. Like there's still a massive portion of the American population, including professionals, we're not talking about like really old people. There's a massive portion of the American population, including professionals, and many of them young and internet savvy, who don't Google the backgrounds of those that they deal with. And of those that do, if they see a source saying, nah, they're clear that the people that are coming against them and reporting about this organization or Qatar Foundation or whoever, those are just hate mongers, they'll buy into it. And you'll see that mindset especially on college campuses where there's a lot of moral equivalency and, no matter how bad that anti-American view is, well, I understand it because I have a lot of empathy. I'm so open-minded that I understand that anti-American point of view. And so when they come across this type of information, it doesn't resonate with them as it would for someone like you or I that would see it and say, no, there's fundamentally things that are right and wrong and things that are good for the country and bad for the country. And teaming up with Islamic extremists is, in all circumstances, bad. That seems common sense. But It's very divorced from a certain part of the so-called progressive left that dabbles in this moral equivalency and doesn't really care about the record of Islamic extremism of potential partners.
It's funny because a lot of what you're saying, when I first got into this and I was looking at Nazareth College, I wrote to the person who was in charge of the history department and I blamed her for the connection. She wrote back to me, but they don't do anything bad anymore. I'm like, excuse me? Come on. You're telling me you knew of the connection to Al-Qaeda, of IIIT's connection to Al-Qaeda, and you thought it was a good thing to take their money? that is what I call treason.
You can throw, and I know you did, court
Yeah.
documents and like Washington Post reporting about the connections to terrorists. Like with IIIT, the group that is a Muslim Brotherhood front. I mean, the connection is so clear as you've documented that there isn't a lot of nuance for someone to escape from. If you don't want to acknowledge reality, there is that natural human temptation to deny the truth by grasping at straws. You can't do that with IIIT. The evidence is just too much. And by the way, any money that goes from IIIT, the Muslim Brotherhood front that gets a lot of foreign financing, any money that goes from IIIT to professors and universities would not show up in these Department of Education records that we use to come up with the figure of over $10 billion in transfers. Why? Because IIIT is supposedly an independent American nonprofit. So if you just go by the numbers from the Department of Education records alone, people's jaws drop. But it has got to be the tip of the iceberg, because if you're smart about what you're doing, you're not going to transfer money this way.
That's so The other thing I wanted to get in, now you're talking about, to me, it's extremely important that we need to get into this. Maybe I know I'm not going to be able to touch on everything, but holy cow, the stuff that you're talking about, we haven't even gotten into the other thing that Qatar Foundation does, because Qatar Foundation has links to schools that are not colleges and universities, correct?
Oh, that's right. Yes. And again, this has been publicly reported. We're not talking about like some blog in the corner of the internet universe. They've given money to K through 12 schools, supposedly for Arabic language classes. But one of the commonalities you'll see in the foreign donors that give to universities or K through 12 is that there's always some pretext, including in the cases where there's bipartisan agreement that it's actually subversion. And very often, teaching a foreign language is that pretext. Like the Chinese, when they set up their Confucius Institutes on American college campuses, there's quotes from Chinese government officials saying, yeah, we say it's for learning the Chinese language, and then we can basically promote any type of propaganda we want. And I have those quotes in our article about all of this. So you might read a newspaper account and say, oh, well, what do I care? They're funding foreign language classes. Understand that foreign officials that engage in this type of conduct have publicly explained what the strategy is here and is to use that as a pretext.
Clarion, both Clarion Project and the Middle East Forum have written extensively on the Qatar Foundation. So if you're looking to learn more, look to both of these great organizations, because they have, and on top of that, Investigative Project on Terrorism is written on them. So, yes.
Right.
Let's go on. Perhaps one of the scariest things you mentioned to me in the article is the financing to colleges by Iran. Now, I know I changed this question for you, Ryan, so here we go. In one of the previous articles, you tracked $290,000 of foreign influence on Canadian universities. McGill University received the lion's share of all the Canadian universities. McGill University is located in Montreal. Now, I'm in Rochester, New York, so it's not that far from me, in Quebec, Canada. You talk about another article that has to do with this topic, and you mention an organization called Alavi Foundation. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. So, as I've said repeatedly before, the numbers in our expose about the money going to universities is only based on the disclosed records by the university with foreign actors. It does not include money that comes through a front within the United States that's actually under the control of a foreign actor, if you want to be sleazy about how you send in your money. The Iranian regime is obviously, those guys are experts in sleaze. So what they did is they have the Alavi Foundation in New York, had a giant skyscraper, and they would get tons of money, and they would send money around supposedly to promote education about Shiite Islam. But everyone, including Iranians, would say, no, this is actually to promote Iranian regime propaganda. The Alavi Foundation at one point was seized by the U.S. government because of its links to Iran and specifically their nuclear program. In recent, I think it was in weeks, but no more than 2 months ago, there was a ruling by a judge that, from what I understand, unfroze the assets of the Alavi Foundation. So they're going to be doing this again. But for a long time, what they were doing before their assets were frozen was sending money to mosques around the United States and Canada and universities. Now, keep in mind, even back then, before the sanctions were on the Iranian regime, they didn't have a lot of money to throw around. I mean, they're not a very wealthy country. So when governments like the Iranian regime are spending this amount of money to mosques or universities, they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. There's something that is compelling them to say, this is a really good investment, because that money could go towards corruption, like nice cars. It could go to terrorists. It could go to a million different things. So they're saying, no, this is the investment working for us. And so I wrote an article back in 2000, I guess it was 2013, going over the 30 universities in the United States and Canada that had gotten money from the Alavi Foundation, and none of these transactions would show up in the Department of Education records that are cited in my recent expose. So as listeners are probably coming to understand, when we say that this expose that we've been talking about is the tip of the iceberg, I mean, that's really true. It's really true. You look at some of these amounts like those you cited.
So nonprofit law, maybe that's the game they have to play. I got involved in, I don't know if you heard, I got involved with reporting of towards the IRS of Georgetown University for the violation of nonprofit law with their bridge initiative. So because they are an educational institution, we filed 83 pages of on their documenting their lies, their propaganda ministry, rather than report the truth. According to the federal government, you cannot cannot give misinformation, you can't distort facts if you call yourself an educational institution. So we've actually requested Georgetown University's nonprofit status be revoked. So here's hoping. Here's hoping.
Yeah, really. And where that ties into is into what we're discussing. Georgetown University has gotten tons of money from the Saudis, including some suspicious characters over there like Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. He gave $20 million to a specific part of Georgetown University that then took on his name. It's now the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding. And the result of that, again, is because they got $20 million from this Saudi prince, and that same center is out there attacking groups like the Clarion Project and defending groups linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, that's not a coincidence. It's fair to suggest that huge amount of foreign money coming from Saudi Arabia has something to do with how that section of Georgetown University reacts to criticism of the radical Islamic influence.
Well, I'm hoping that we can, I'm going to be following through. Len Getz is the creator of this idea, and I'm hoping we get to do something with that. So I'm waiting to see. He, being a former IRS guy, he explained to me, you got to remember, IRS works really slowly. Well,
right.
The evidence we gave them is overwhelming. And granted that if I was them, I'd have to check everything. But yeah, it's how many pieces of evidence do you need to find a propaganda ministry? That's exactly what
really.
they have going.
You really should never. It's really as simple as this. For people that are legally minded or are researching these things, it comes down to this. The activities of a university or a college in any way should not reflect the interests of foreign donors. Like right there is a breach. You can't, a foreign government or a foreign organization can't give money to a college and say we want you to modify your behavior in a way that benefits the donor. You can really only ethically and legally donate if you're saying, hey, I want to genuinely fund foreign language or I want to help students do X, Y, or Z. But when it comes to actual operations and how things are taught and what type of views are promoted, as soon as that line is crossed, you have a legal argument against that institution.
And that's the thing. It's so open and blatant that that's exactly it. It's kind of very frustrating. We've mentioned Iran and Qatar, and I know we're just talking about Saudi Arabia. Can you talk about the Wahhabi part of this financing of colleges? Can you explain a little bit more about that influence?
Sure. So this has been going on for a long time, and it's done openly because the Saudi government says, and all Islamic-based governments are going to believe this, that they are required by their faith to promote dawah, their specific version and interpretation of Islam around the world. And so they believe that they have to, under all circumstances, do this in some way. Now, when that government is Wahhabist, like that which rules Saudi Arabia, although MBS, the Crown Prince, is better than some of the other leaders that we've had, there's multiple power players within Saudi Arabia. Having one Crown Prince that's a little bit more lax doesn't mean that the entire Wahhabist establishment has been dismantled or anything like that. But the Saudi government has for decades openly said that they're funding mosques, education systems, really everything you can donate to around the world in order to promote their Wahhabist, like puritanical interests, as well as obviously to try to win converts to it. And if you look at the chart that we have in our expose that myself and Alex Van Ness and the other people at Clarion Project put together, that lists the amounts that are going to universities, since 2012, the Saudi Arabian donors have given about $650 million to 63 universities that we know about. Again, $650 million to 63 universities that we know about. That's number 3 on the list. They are only surpassed by Qatar, which we discussed. That's the number 1 donor at about $1.5 billion to at least 28 universities. Then it's China at $680 million to about 87 universities. And that there's a bipartisan consensus that that's essentially a spy and propaganda operation. And then the Saudis come in 3rd place.
Wow, and yeah, we can definitely say there's a propaganda and a spy operation on, but nobody's stopping the financial influence.
And what's really amazing about this is that at least on the issue of Huawei Technologies, which is like a telecommunications company that's, to simplify, it's essentially an extension of the Chinese government because they have to be, and they pose a major technology risk for espionage to the United States if we work with them. And Trump has cracked down on them a bit, and members of Congress, including Chuck Schumer and others, and Chuck Schumer being a Democrat, that's very important, are pushing for further actions to basically keep Huawei Technologies outside the United States, saying it's essentially a branch of the Chinese Communist Party. The reason I raise that is because a lot of the money in these records that we reviewed showed Huawei Technologies donating to universities. So that might be the opening that we need, because we have Republicans and Democrats agreeing about Chinese operations on colleges and universities. So they're now talking about foreign influence operations. It's through the prism of China. But it shouldn't be too hard to broaden that and say, well, what about Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Russia and Turkey and all these other countries that are doing it? So we have a really important opportunity. So I wouldn't come away completely discouraged, because the dialogue around some of this right now is very healthy and something to be encouraged about.
Well, that's exciting to hear. That at least that we have, it's not just a one-sided fight at this point. That's good. You also mentioned Turkey and Pakistan and other Islamist regimes gave financial support to colleges and universities in the United States. What do you think these countries get? That's the big question. What do you think they gain besides influence? I mean, I think influence is the big thing, but do you think they gain anything besides that?
It's possible they get business initiatives, if they're cooperating with the university on research initiatives. There can be economic benefits to this. I don't know how much I want any of these governments to benefit even economically. I don't know if I even like that. Or, for example, Al Jazeera gaining from the manpower provided by Northeastern University by working with the students there. So there are different ways that they can gain through individual programs, economically, helping individual entities, like I said, Al Jazeera or Huawei Technologies. But I think the big thing is overall just influencing the minds of the next generation, influencing the education, recruiting spies, since intelligence services have long understandably viewed college campuses as a great, safe way to operate. And that's partially why every once in a while you hear about a professor that's been locked up for ties to terrorists or for spying, because it's a great way to operate. So there's many different reasons that they feel this is a worthy investment, but there's still a lot that we don't know, because it takes hours to to research these transactions. And when you do that, you usually find something very disturbing. But there's a lot of transactions, and there's a lot of money to go through in order to find all of that out.
And as nonprofits, they have to report. So this is, yeah, this has got to be just the tip of the iceberg, and it's kind of a scary, scary thought. Wow, we've mentioned the Russian and Chinese financial influence. And my next question was going to be: it seems that every country has money to spare in trying to gain influence in the United States by giving money to colleges. Do you think Russia or China? Do you think they would have been able to contribute in the 1970s and 80s to the United States?
Yes, but from my understanding of Cold War policies, especially when it came to communists, is that it was easier to give communist entities a certain designation so that we could gather intelligence on them. And just overall, there wasn't this political correctness that's going on. There wasn't this moral equivalency going on, at least to the degree that you see now, because now it's like you say anything about any foreign entity, and the blowback you get is enormous, generally speaking, even if you're talking to a radical, because it's, oh, well, you're not being tolerant. Are you trying to understand their point of view? That's kind of the response you get. I would say things are easier now than during the 1970s. Although I don't know if in the 70s universities and colleges had to actually declare each and every transaction. I forget exactly when that law started, but I know there was a time period where they did not have to publicly put into a record saying this money came from this foreign country, and then researchers could actually go and look it up.
I think it might have been when we started writing the nonprofit law changes and about reporting. That might have been late 70s, early 80s. So, yeah. I think there was a mindset, though, at least when I was in the 70s, when I was in school, we were taught things like the only good red is a dead red back then. So it would have been dangerous for a school to get the impression that they were for anybody to get the impression that they were taking money from communists.
Patriotism was not viewed as backwards like it is now, like something for hillbillies. Like right now, when it's sort of like when students and even just some people in Hollywood like kind of mockingly would say America, they think, oh, it's funny, but you're actually mocking how parts of the population express patriotism, and that's a consequence of cultural and moral equivalence. Back then, like just what you said, you had liberals and conservatives, you had all this diversity in political opinion, but there was a consensus that communism is bad. that there was some type of line there where there's good and there's evil, there's conduct that you should do and conduct that you shouldn't do, and now it's just so blurry.
That's
culturally
scary.
speaking, I'm saying. Yeah, culturally speaking, it seems like everything can be justified by some type of moral or cultural equivalence.
It's so accurate what you're saying. So now I'm curious, what's the most surprising thing that you found in this research?
It was definitely the amounts. Because to me, if I'm thinking like a hostile foreign actor, I'm not going to do these direct transactions because it's smarter to just manipulate the process and hide what I'm doing through an independent nonprofit. So I figured that these amounts of showing the direct recordable transactions from foreign governments and companies tied to foreign governments to academia would be relatively small because it's just so transparent. But no, that shows how emboldened they are. That they're like, no, let's just do it the easy way because the dumb Americans don't care. It'll show up in their records. It'll probably be disclosed. But guess what? No one's going to care. I mean, that's the only reasoning why those running a hostile foreign influence operation would do it this way. Is because they are under the belief that the Americans don't care.
That's a scary thought. And that's probably very true. I mean, what got me when I started looking, it got me into this whole thing. They really did not care where the money came from. They only cared that they got it. And they didn't care what it might cause them to do. And that's, I guess that's something I can't comprehend, because boards of trustees, their job is to actually look at things like that, where you're getting money from something. What will it cause us to do? And that's a concept that seems so foreign to me, that you wouldn't. I mean, that's basically boards of trustees not doing their job when
In
they're
fact,
supposed to be
almost all of
looking
them
at
wouldn't do their job in this way.
Yeah.
It's just so astonishing. Like, you would like to think that the board of trustees would say, "Oh my God, there's $1 million transaction coming in from the Palestinian Authority. I would like to find out what that's for." And it seems like that conversation and thinking process doesn't even take place. At least I'm not seeing evidence of it. We're not seeing evidence of debates or discussions or examinations of all this internally.
So what I found out in my encounters with board members of Nazareth College, this is I'm only talking about Nazareth College of Rochester. Their answer was, "Our job is to rubber stamp." I like, excuse me, did you read what your job is? Because I mean, it was posted on the site that they're supposed to be looking at these things, and not one of them understood what their position, their actual job was, which they just thought their job had to do with rubber stamping.
Some of it might be, as simple as donation is a nice word. Like, for a lot of people, if you hear the word donation, the thought that, there could be a hidden meaning behind that, or that could somehow be bad, doesn't cross your mind, because it's like saying Christmas. Everyone loves Christmas. Donation equals good. Like, so it doesn't even enter their thought process like, that donation could be bad because it's a donation. It's going to charity. That's great, and that's wonderful. And so maybe even the entire topic of that this can be problematic and donations can be problematic, especially to universities, may not even cross their mind. Or if it does, they dismiss it as McCarthyism.
Maybe we need to create a new training for people who are on boards of trustees to examine where their
That's a really good idea.
come from.
It's a really good idea. I haven't heard anyone raise that, actually. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my goals in life, to not just point out the problem, to start working on them. I think that's something that would be an excellent project for Clarion for Clarion Intelligence Network. Instead of just we're pointing out the problem, give them go to it. Here's how you roll it out, Ryan. You ready? You get the whole concept ready, sketched out, ready, and you go to a human resources online training center, and you propose it as training, is to put into their training for boards of trustees. Now, these online training centers, this is how they're rolling out education now to professional educators and stuff, and through universities, they do a lot of online training now. So if you can put something together, sketch it out into scenes, even just the important, what does it mean if you find a connection that could be questionable with the influence of money? What could it mean for the college? If you can put something together like that, I mean, you guys have the talent. I know, because you can put the movies out and stuff. If even put the skits together for them, offer it to them. I mean, I'd give it to them for free just to get them somebody to start.
I love the idea of that. I don't know actually if we do have the resources to do it, especially if it were to take off and become popular very quickly.
Well, all you have to do is put it together with
does some different stuff, but
you have incredibly talented people. You have incredibly talented people there. I've only besides you, I've only talked. I think it's David I've talked with, and then the guy who was booking you. And it's just been exciting to see where Clarion Project has gone over the years. I'm impressed. It seems like a lot of growth in these past few years. I don't know what you guys have done. It's like the past, I'd say the past 2 or 3 years. To me, it's exploded, but I don't know what exactly is going on there. It seems a lot bigger.
That's great to hear, because sometimes I wonder if it's the other way around, because we change what we do a lot. So sometimes we'll be in the media more, and then these days I'm doing more with law enforcement and deep research instead of, going for quality instead of quantity in terms of what we publish. So we're always experimenting. So we appreciate the feedback because you never know what's really the right balance.
Stick with the quality, Ryan. That's why I read your stuff.
All right, thank you.
Why don't you tell people how they can follow you and support the Clarion Project?
Sure. The best thing to do is go to clarionproject.org and like us on Facebook and Twitter and all of that. These days with social media, you never know what's going to actually show up in your news feed because of the weird algorithms. So I would say definitely sign up for our email list because social media is very problematic, to say the least.
That's an understatement. Places like my job, again, I work in education. They banned LinkedIn this morning, and then they had to fix it because a number of professionals were upset.
Why would they ban LinkedIn?
Well, again, I'm working in a high school, so that was the question. That was the question.
The safest platform. I understand
people.
Facebook and Twitter come from hell.
Yeah.
I understand that, but LinkedIn is the driest, most boring social media platform.
So Facebook was permitted.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. So they got. Oh, and by the way, Clarion Project was blocked until I got it fixed. I complained about that too, and they fixed it.
All right. Well, thanks for that. There's good news in that and bad news in what you just told me.
Oh, I can't wait. I wrote to the guys who were in charge, and I asked if they were connected to SPLC. Ryan, I got to let you go because I got to get through the rest of this. I want to say thank you. I'm going to hope to put this up on YouTube as well, this interview. I'm excited. I think we've got a long ways to – this fight just seems longer and longer. But if we don't, the importance is the fight. We can't stop. God bless
you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so much for having me. Thank you.
Wow. This man does an incredible amount of work, and I can't even tell you how much he's doing for us and how much he encouraged me to begin with. Ryan again is the first person to encourage me to write and to continue with